is Michele Jaco, host of the Inside the Chapters podcast for the novel When I See the Wolf Ride. And here's a recap of what happened in Chapter 13 of Book 1. Captain Avigdor gives Lee an undercover job, along with Hershey and Art, supervised by the Texas Rangers. Their first mission is to investigate some old buildings in Rome, Texas, where they discover a woman with a vicious dog that attacks Lee and a man that is trying to take out Captain Avigdor. After subduing the suspects, they rescue 14 young girls that have been kidnapped. After being detained for debriefing for the rest of the week, Lee visits Awanasa, Degataga, and Elizabeth. They have all been worried about him, and Elizabeth is visibly angry with him because the Rangers wouldn't let him call her. When he returns to his new adopted parents' house, he gets the news that DJ has run away from the Catholic school, and there is a dangerous thunderstorm coming. Finally, Lee finds DJ at the base of the school's old water tower.
I ran to him. DJ, we've got to get out of here. There's a tornado coming.
No, you lie. You lied to Doug. You said you would be dead. I said I love you. You never said it back. You lie. You don't love me. You don't want me. Nobody wants Doug. So what if I die? Nobody care about Doug.
I grabbed his shoulders. I care. I cared in Vietnam and I care more now. I admit I wasn't sure I could even be a father. I want the best for you and I wasn't sure I was it. I don't have any idea how I will live my life, how I will take care of you. I'm gonna make mistakes and disappoint you. I may have to be gone for days at a time for my work. I took the amulet from my neck and put it on his. Wolf gave this to Elizabeth because he loved her. She was family. And I'm giving it to you to prove you're my family. I want you to be DJ, my American son. I don't want to live my life without you. He sobbed and hugged my neck. The old metal structure was creaking from the strain of the wind, which roared like a freight train. The tornado was upon us. I put DJ flat on the ground and I laid on top of him. Metal and water crashed all around us as the wind tried to carry us away. I could see him looking up at me without fear as I covered his body with mine.
Welcome to the audio production of the novel When I See the Wolf Ride, Book 1, Chapter 14. Copyright 2024 by Jeffrey Lee Neal. Read by the author, with Michele Jaco reading the part of Elizabeth. And now, here is Chapter 14 of When I See the Wolf Ride, Book 1.
Chapter 14, For the Love of Ipo. From the Bible. Who can find a wife of noble character? For her value is far more than rubies. Proverbs 31:10. On my return to Dallas, and through the following couple of days, every woman I saw on a magazine cover or a billboard was Elizabeth. She was the face of every girl on TV. She was the voice on the radio, the haunting image in my dreams. After a couple of nights, I could wait no longer to know. It took 4 rings for her to pick up.
Hello?
Hi, it's me, Leahy.
I know.
I was wondering how you are.
Fine.
A single word spoken, containing no emotion whatsoever. Look, I didn't like the way we ended our time together this week, so I wanted to see if maybe we might be able to get together.
Leahy, I'm sorry. I have plans this weekend.
Plans? What kind of plans?
I have a date.
Oh, wasn't expecting that.
Leahy, I can't do this with you right now. Goodbye.
So, with DJ asleep, at some point I closed my eyes, watching Johnny Carson. I can't remember who the guests were. On Friday, when I reported back to the office, Captain Avigdor walked me into the training room. Going up north this weekend? No, sir. DJ and I are going to hang around Dallas. Then why don't you hang around with Crystal and me? Look what I got. 4 tickets to Six Flags over Texas. DJ will love this. That Saturday, I encountered an entirely different Ed Avigdor. The quiet, reserved, speaking only when you are spoken to soldier was replaced by a happy, laughing, loving dad. Our Vietnamese kids were totally enthralled. It was exhausting. They were scared of the roller coasters and afterwards begging us to ride them again. They loved driving the old Model T cars. LaSalle's boat ride adventure terrified them as cannons shot at our boat. They laughed out loud as we all got drenched in the log ride. Finally, to get a break, we found some smaller rides with little carts that only they could fit into. Wet and exhausted, the captain and I collapsed on a bench while Crystal and DJ joy-rode in circles. The captain grinned. Ain't nothing like fatherhood, huh? It kind of feels like basic training, but I do believe this is the best day of my life so far. I'm glad you came. They're like brother and sister. Soldiers don't always make the best fathers. You get used to being rough, talking tough, losing that place inside you that can love a child. I nodded. We're gonna need some women in our lives, you know. Ain't fair to either one of them to just have a father, and it ain't gonna be easy. I've been in the military for what seems like my whole life, Coit. When I was a younger man, sex was recreational. You fought hard, you loved hard, everything in your life was 1,000%, or you just didn't do it. There was a long line of, he sighed, Vietnamese women. I didn't give a hootin' hell about one of them. He stopped, slightly smiling at a memory. Then I met Crystal's mother. Her name was Key. Key? It means precious in Vietnamese, and she was. I was scouting suspected enemy territory when I ran across Mama T's huts, and I saw Key. She was caring for all of these children. I'd never seen anyone with so soft a touch, with a voice so beautiful. How did you ever make that work? I made it work by coming to visit her every moment I had free. If I had liberty, even if I had a mission, I would visit. I fell in love with Mama T and the children, too. Mama T found Key on a road when she was little. She was only 5, abandoned and starving. They brought her into their little family there. Most of the children they rescued left when they became teenagers, but Key stayed and helped. I think it was mainly out of the love she had for those little ones. I couldn't believe someone so beautiful came from such poverty. After all the other women you had been with, how did you... I never finished the sentence. No, she was the one. She was the only person I'd ever met I couldn't live without. She barely even spoke English. It took me 6 months to convince her to marry me. I asked every time I saw her. After the 3rd week, I met her. And then you finally married her? Yep, right there in front of that old hut. I'd convinced a Catholic priest to come out there and do the ceremony. Mama T gave her away. We spent our honeymoon together in another little hut I'd built a few yards into the woods. I wanted to take her back to a city, to a real hotel, but she wouldn't leave the children, not in a time of war. I would have stayed there with them after my tour. Crystal was born in our honeymoon hut, 9.5 months later. What happened? The tough old soldier was holding back tears. I lost her. I ain't going there. I ain't letting those memories ruin these. Coit, I hope someday you meet your own Key. As I carried DJ in my arms to his little bed in my apartment, I was overwhelmed by the ramifications of fatherhood. Should I even be working in a law enforcement job? If something happened to me, I knew Degataga and Awanasa or Mama T would take DJ in. But for right now, it was just him and me. DJ needed a mom. It's funny, the memories that don't fade. For this period, I remember the food I had the next weekend. In Durant, there was crispy fried chicken and catfish, along with corn, beans, and squash, known in the Cherokee tradition as the Three Sisters. Growing up, I hated soup, but Awanasa made a killer canucci. While I loved the cuisine, my real craving was information. I guess Elizabeth is dating that same pest control guy on a regular basis now. Awanasa shot a glance for assistance to Degataga, who looked up long enough to nod before returning to slurping his kanuchi. I sighed. I thought she still might have feelings for me. Awanasa elbowed Degataga. He almost choked as his wife's stare demanded a response. He held the filled spoon in place for an instant.
Probably.
And then into his mouth. Awanasa smiled.
Maybe she needs some time.
Degataga's eyes darted to her, and then back to me.
Lihi, you may not have much time. He's here. You're not. She at least needs to know you want to be.
I was standing before I realized it. I've got to run an errand. As I left, Awanasa stared daggers at Degataga, who frowned back.
What?
The portable building at Fort Washita felt smaller and less inviting than my first visit. Elizabeth, wearing a white blouse and gray skirt, attended to a family of 4, showing the clueless dad in the fishing vest some area maps as the pretty mom tried to keep her 7-year-old boy from pulling the rest of the brochures from their containers. The little girl, who looked about 5, stretched to see the top of the display case. As I pretended to look at the bulletin board, Elizabeth glanced at me every now and then. The boy grabbed a handful of pencils from a container next to some forms to see what it would look like when he threw them on the floor.
Jeffrey!
Mom grabbed the little hellion in one hand while trying to pick up pencils with the other.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. Jerry, just take the maps.
Maps in hand, the couple wrestled their squirming offspring out the door. The new silence found us standing there, neither lovers nor adversaries, searching each other's faces. Instinctively, we bent down together to pick up pencils. She smiled.
DJ would never act like that.
I wanted to see you. I was staring at her instead of pencils. She stopped, losing her smile.
I know. I haven't been fair to you.
She stood and looked away, putting the pencils back, staring at the container.
But now I'm dating someone.
I stood up. I put my pencils in the container, covering her hand with mine. I'm not over you. I'm not sure I ever will be. She turned and frowned.
Did you not hear me?
I frowned. Maybe you didn't hear me. She walked behind the counter as if a barrier between us would help.
Lihi, what do you want me to say?
I stepped closer. If it's over between us, if there's nothing in your heart for me, I'll go out that door and never come back. Her eyes widened, yet her expression never changed. Now or never. But Elizabeth, I need you to tell me. She continued to stare. Was this resentment, rejection, or regret? Our standoff was interrupted by the ring of the little bell on the door as 2 more families with meandering children invaded the tiny office. We stood there a moment longer until she had to respond to them. It was time to leave for a lot of reasons.
Y'all done good last week, but some powerful people who put you here are worried that if y'all start to get noticed, something about our adventures in Vietnam might become public. Ain't never gonna be interviews with the press, no attaboys, no recognition of any kind. You work undercover.
The captain, looking spiffy in his Texas Rangers uniform, was a sharp contrast to Art, Hershey, and me, wearing old jeans and t-shirts, the uniforms of undercover work.
Most of the Rangers have a less than favorable opinion of y'all. They feel they earned that title of Ranger, and that our little group of youngsters has been forced on them. So don't expect a lot of love.
Art grinned.
If I want love, I will not be seeking it from a middle-aged obese man in a felt cowboy hat.
Hershey laughed out loud.
You'll get the same response from that pretty receptionist out there, except I'd be more afraid of her than some old coot in a cowboy hat.
The captain raised his hands to tone it down.
Okay, that's enough. We got a couple of Texas Rangers assigned to us for training. Ranger Roy Holt and Ranger Tim Tex Rogers. Roy's got some land near Louisville Lake. We'll start out there.
Our first day with Ranger Roy Holt began in his ranch house, rustic inside and out, an ensemble of logs, rock, and brick that stood proudly below replanted East Texas pine trees, next to a horse corral, an old barn, and several acres of land that bordered Lake Louisville north of Dallas. The second-place trophy for bull riding, 1966, from the Rodeo Cowboys Association, rested proudly with several others on the chiseled wooden mantel over the hand-built rock fireplace in a living room that looked like the set of an old Western movie.
I got those back when I was somebody.
The voice over my shoulder came from beneath Roy Holt's peppered handlebar mustache. His leathery face, broad shoulders, and dark features could intimidate when they needed to, but the man standing beside me now smiled like an old congenial cowboy.
What are you talking about? You're still somebody, Daddy.
Emerald blue eyes, bright red flowing hair, and a few well-placed freckles populated the face of Roy's 22-year-old daughter Carol, standing in the doorway, just in from the corral, covered with dust, and she still made her old work clothes look sexy.
To ride a bull in a rodeo would be a great adventure.
Art had to look up more than the rest of us did to admire the trophies. Roy shook his head.
Only good reason to ride a bull is to meet a nurse, son.
Roy glanced back at Carol and smiled.
Mine was a redhead.
Family pictures shared the wall space with authentic guns, knives, and a couple of awards of merit from the Fort Worth police, documenting part of the path that led this old bull rider to the famed Texas Rangers. A portrait of a younger Roy Holt and a beautiful redhead with stunning blue eyes drew my attention. I glanced back at the old man in faded jeans and worn boots, stopping myself before I asked what happened. He stepped up to admire the photo, as if it were for the first time.
My favorite picture. My God, she was beautiful.
He turned to me with his own tiger stare.
If cancer was a man, I'd have killed him. That answer your question, son?
No one else spoke or even moved as the lanky 6'1" ranger picked up his old cowboy hat and his gun belt, his eyes peeled on the doorway as if it was an escape route. Carol walked up to her parents' picture, smiling.
He loved her, but he couldn't save her.
She turned her smile to me. The combination of blue eyes, red hair, freckles, and dirt were even more stunning close up.
So he blamed himself. I'm Carol.
Quite. She held out her hand. I took it, probably more gently than I should have. I've never known how to shake hands with a lady. Art stepped up quickly, grinning like a predator.
My name is...
Don't. My interruption caused everyone to look at us. I grinned and put my hand on his shoulder. Just call him Art. You'll thank me later.
At your service, Carol.
He took her hand like an Italian aristocrat, kissing it, then shaking it gently but confidently. It made her giggle. The afternoon sunlight leapt through gently swaying branches of live oaks, creating patterns in the dirt at the feet of Roy Holt and the other ranger who had joined us, Tim Tex Rogers. Roy Holt looked thin and malnourished as he leaned over to Tex, whose 6-foot frame carried almost 250 pounds. This clean-shaven, puffy-faced ranger always wore his frown, his felt hat, his gray shirt, his star badge, and his polished boots, even out here. Time for target practice. Tex yelled, "Guns up," the battle cry from Texas Tech, his alma mater. Roy watched how we shot. 30 minutes later, we were back near the barn where we started. Roy stroked his mustache.
So they destroyed every one of them targets. These boys shoot better than we can. Ain't nothing I need to teach them about guns.
Tex turned his frown to us, sitting in a row on bales of hay, like kids in algebra class about to get chewed out by their teacher.
Being good with your weapon takes more than just knowing how to use it. Don't aim without a reason. Don't shoot if you got another choice. And if you do have to shoot, make sure your aim is true and your reason is justified. That way you won't be taking that shot again in your heart over and over. Now, let's go over how you handcuff a prisoner.
He motioned at Art to join him.
After you give a prisoner the Marenta warning,
his frown moved from Art back to us.
You make the prisoner put his hands behind his back.
He motioned for Art to comply as he spoke, and the cuffs were instantly secure on Art's wrists.
Any questions?
Roy Holt grinned.
You think you might ought to check your prisoner again?
Tex frowned back at Art, who was free, dangling the handcuffs in his right hand like a keychain. Laughter from the hay bales. Roy sauntered up next to Art.
You sure you tightened them things?
Tex took them back from Art, still frowning.
I'm fat and old, not senile. I had that happen with a magician once. You a magician, son?
Art smiled proudly.
I am double-jointed, sir. Was the magician double-jointed?
Don't know. I shot him.
Art lost his smile. This guy might have really done it.
Why don't you demonstrate with me?
Captain Avigdor stepped up to the old ranger, turning and putting his hands in position. Tex's intimidating frown morphed into a more inquisitive one as he slipped the bracelets on the captain's wrists.
You act like you've done this before.
There was a time in my life I had a lot of practice at this.
After 3 weeks of training by day and eating around the campfire at night while Mama T watched DJ, we experienced quite a bit of Roy's cowboy wisdom. Things like don't squat wearing spurs, or quit digging for water under your outhouse, or if you're about to speak your mind, you better have a fast horse. It was like learning philosophy from Gabby Hayes.
Son, with a face that long, your barber's liable to charge you double.
I couldn't see my own face, only the meandering reflections of the campfire's light, illuminating the inquisitive grins of Roy Holt, Art, and Hershey. In the distance, I could make out the silhouettes of Ed Avigdor and Tex, leaning against the corral. Looked like a pretty intense discussion. The captain never said as much as his face did. It was like a mask of guilt and pain, the countenance of a tortured soul on probation from the hell he had experienced. Roy stroked his mustache as if he wasn't sure he ought to share his next thought.
Y'all probably don't know Tex is a devout Christian. He believes in moral purity. No drinking, no smoking, and no fornicating around on his wife, Chaplain Jewel Rogers. Tex's world is full of black or white, right or wrong. Ain't a lot of shades of gray in between.
Roy gestured toward the captain's things.
I've been watching Tex and your captain during our breaks. I'll overhear them talking about biblical topics. Righteousness, hell, salvation. There's a monogrammed Bible in the captain's backpack from Tex.
Hershey smiled.
You telling us Tex, who frowns even when he's eating ice cream, monogrammed the captain's name on a Bible? Nope. It's monogrammed with the word forgiven.
Roy shook his head and spit in the dirt.
But I don't think your captain believes it.
I had my own problems, and Roy noticed.
You can't stop thinking about that little blonde in Durant.
Roy stroked his peppered mustache.
Son, loving's like racing. Sometimes your horse gets hot, sometimes your goat gets got. You ain't gonna find your horse betting on you crossing the finish line. You can learn a lot from a good horse.
Hershey lost his smile.
6'2", you deserve to have a good woman that'll love you back. Maybe that ain't Liz.
I felt my head shaking in the negative, even though my heart wasn't sure. I really believe she still cares for me. She's just afraid to admit it.
She sure ain't afraid to admit she likes that other guy. 6'2", if you're going to get manhandled by some woman, you might as well enjoy it. Let me take you out this Saturday and cheer you up.
Art stood up.
He's right. The best cure for a broken heart is a well-worn bisello. Hai bisogno di una donna.
I grimaced. I'm afraid to ask what that means, Art. Hershey grinned.
I think you know what it means.
I'm not looking for a one-night stand. Art smiled.
My brother, we only want to show you a good time. Some liquor and some laughing ladies. Free your mind from your pain for a while. Leave when you want. Remain a virgin if you like.
That weekend, after being carried off by Art and Hershey to an establishment I don't remember for a night of activities I can't recall, my clearest memory is throwing up in Hershey's apartment around 3 in the afternoon, realizing I had lost all of my clothing, save for my boxers, while listening to Art and Hershey cheering me on. I made it through the following Monday's training in forensics, but just barely. At 4 p.m., I had still not eaten anything. Leaning against Roy's old wood fence around his corral, it felt like that was all I had keeping me upright. I dreaded seeing the captain approaching.
Why don't you come to dinner at my place tonight? We'll forego the campfire.
Cap, I appreciate it, but I'm really not very good company right now.
I agree. That's why you're coming. DJ needs a good meal.
Then he sort of chuckled.
And you need some hangover therapy. Be there at 7.
It was an order. You never disobeyed at Avigdor. When I knocked on his door that night, I was greeted by a stunning Polynesian woman dressed in a colorful Hawaiian peru. This 5'11" beauty had thinner facial features than most Polynesians, a dark complexion, and long black flowing hair with a flower on the right side of her head. As I was wondering whether this was the right apartment, Crystal ran up behind her before the woman could speak.
DJ, this is Ipo. Isn't she beautiful?
The woman smiled.
Ipo Kahali.
I am Mr. Avidor's housekeeper.
Before I could answer, the captain appeared behind her.
Come in.
Gruff but loving.
Take your shoes off.
I stopped. Did I hear that right? He glanced at Ipo.
Tonight, we're doing things the Polynesian way. Crystal, show DJ what Ipo made for you.
DJ, come see.
Crystal went for DJ's shoes, pulling them off before he could, and then pulling him by the hand back to her room. On the formerly blank walls, now there was a genuine mix of cultures. Relics from Vietnam, carvings from Hawaii, and the captain's awards from the Army. Ipo had changed the personality of this place. Ed Avigdor's order broke my concentration.
And you, take your socks off too. Before we have dinner, we're gonna get you right.
I was marched to an upstairs bedroom and ordered to lie down on my back. My left foot felt an unusual sensation. I jerked back, an uncontrollable reflex. Ipo shot a knowing grin at the captain.
This may tickle at first.
You lay right there and let her work on your feet.
That was an order. You didn't disobey. At least, I didn't. During the next 10 seconds, I could feel her loving touch throughout my entire body. How did you learn this?
Shh. Be still and quiet. Concentrate. Meditate on pleasant things and people you love.
Lomi Lomi is a traditional kind of massage they do in Hawaii, Coit. Receiving a Lomi Lomi massage was considered a great honor in ancient Hawaii. Ipo is giving you a gift.
Ipo glanced at the captain to correct him.
This is only a small portion. The Lomi Lomi treatment was a rite of passage performed for centuries in Hawaiian temples. It was considered a sacred, renewing ritual. A young man or young woman receiving the treatment would then have a spirit vision as to what their place in the world would be. It is from the ancient Hawaiian philosophy called Huna, which is based on the belief that everything should seek harmony and love within the universe.
After a few minutes of harmony and love from the universe, not only did I feel better than I had for weeks, I was starving. Next was an amazing traditional Polynesian chicken dish with a sweet glaze that was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I did more chewing than talking at dinner. 24 hours ago, I never dreamed I would ever feel this good again. When we were finished, Ipo would not allow us to clean up. We were dismissed to the front room and the children into a bedroom to play. Lying on the couch like a couple of walruses on the docks in San Francisco, we were both so satisfied, so relaxed, that for a few moments we didn't even speak. Then finally, he turned his head to me.
What do you think of Ipo?
I grinned. I think I'm in love with your housekeeper.
So am I.
He was serious. How long have you known her?
Not long.
He smiled.
But Crystal does need a mother, you know.
I grinned. The sacrifices we make for our children.
That concludes Chapter 14. We invite you next to read the PDF or listen to Chapter 15, entitled Campfires and Callings. We also invite you to listen to our podcast for Chapter 14, in which Michele Jaco talks with Jeff Neal about the story, the characters, and the symbolic elements within the chapter. Music for this production was licensed from the Smart Sound Collection, and cover art was created from Adobe Stock Images. Some voice work was enhanced by AI technology from 11 Labs.